Picture a quiet, snowy night, in a peaceful Tokyo suburb. Inside a modest family home, life is unfolding as usual.
Uh-huh.
Mikio Miyazawa, the father, is engrossed in his work, the glow of his computer screen, illuminating his face.
Hmm.
Upstairs, his wife Yasuko and their 8-year-old daughter Nina are fast asleep, their dreams undisturbed. 6-year-old Ray is snuggled in his bed, lost in the world of slumber.
Right.
It's a scene of tranquility, a snapshot of ordinary family life. But the serenity of this December night in 2000 would be shattered, leaving behind a mystery that continues to haunt Japan to this very day.
It's the contrast, isn't it? You know, that jarring shift from the mundane to the utterly horrific that makes this case so compelling, so chilling.
Absolutely, and it's a case that has gripped the imagination of people worldwide. The Setagaya Family Murders. Welcome to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Indeed. The Setagaya case is a labyrinth of unanswered questions, a puzzle with missing pieces that has confounded investigators for over 2 decades.
Okay, so let's retrace the steps of that fateful night. We know it was late, sometime after 11:30 p.m., when the intruder entered the Miyazawa home. But instead of forcing a door or smashing a window on the ground floor, he chose a more unsettling point of entry.
He climbed to the second floor and slipped in through a small bathroom window. It's a detail that immediately raises questions. Why this window? Was it simply a matter of opportunity, or did it suggest a familiarity with the house, a chilling awareness of the family's routines?
Yeah, it's hard not to feel a shiver run down your spine, imagining the intruder stealthily making his way into the home, unseen and unheard, under the cover of darkness. And then the unimaginable happens. Young Ray, asleep in his bed, is the first victim.
The intruder strangled the young boy. It's a chilling thought, the silent and brutal nature of this first attack. And it's believed that the sounds of this struggle woke Mikio, the father who confronted the intruder.
And that confrontation ended tragically. Mikio, in a desperate attempt to protect his family, fought back against the intruder, but he was overpowered and fatally stabbed multiple times.
The escalation of violence is swift and brutal. Awakened by the commotion, Yasuko and Nina try to escape, but they too are caught and murdered near the stairs. In a matter of minutes, an entire family is wiped out, their lives extinguished in a frenzy of violence.
It's heartbreaking. And what makes this case even more disturbing is what the killer did after the murders. Instead of fleeing the scene, he remained in the house for hours.
This is where the Setagaya case veers sharply from a seemingly straightforward, albeit tragic, murder case into something far more complex and unsettling. The killer's actions after the murders are baffling, a mix of methodical planning and seemingly bizarre behavior.
So walk us through it. What exactly did he do during those hours?
He moved through the house, almost casually. He helped himself to ice cream from the family's refrigerator. He even used their computer browsing the internet. And perhaps most unsettling of all, he treated his own wounds in the kitchen, leaving behind blood-stained bandages.
Hold on, he used their computer. What was he searching for?
That remains a mystery. Investigators have never publicly revealed what sites he visited or what he might have been looking for online. It's a tantalizing detail, another piece of the puzzle that could hold vital clues but remains frustratingly out of reach.
It's almost as if he was trying to blend in with the family to leave his mark on their lives in a way that went beyond the horrific act he had just committed. And then after all this, he simply vanishes, leaving behind a wealth of evidence, but no clear path to his identity.
That's the paradox of the Setagaya case. The abundance of evidence rather than providing answers only deepened the mystery. The killer was meticulous in some ways, careless in others, creating a confusing and ultimately frustrating trail for investigators to follow.
So let's talk about that evidence. What did the police find at the scene, and did any of it lead to a suspect?
The investigation was massive, one of the largest in Japanese history. They meticulously combed through the crime scene, collecting every piece of evidence, every fiber, every fingerprint, every drop of blood. The murder weapon, a knife, was quickly traced back to a local store purchased on the very day of the murders. It seemed like a promising lead, a chance to identify the buyer, but,
There's always a but in this case, isn't there?
You're catching on. The purchase was made in cash, and there was no surveillance footage from the store at that time. It was a dead end.
Okay, so what about the other belongings he left behind? You mentioned a sweater earlier.
Ah, the sweater. This is where the case takes another intriguing turn. The sweater was a rare type, a limited edition with only 130 ever made. And of those, investigators determined that only 10 had been sold in the Tokyo area. It seemed like the perfect clue, a needle in a haystack that was about to be found. They tracked down every single buyer, but
Another dead end.
not a single match. None of the buyers fit the profile, had any connection to the family, or could be placed at the crime scene. It was as if the killer had deliberately chosen this rare item, knowing it would lead investigators on a wild goose chase.
It's like he was playing a game, leaving behind these clues that seemed promising, but ultimately led nowhere. It's enough to make you question his motive. Was it simply to kill, or was it something more twisted? A desire to outsmart the authorities, to prove his superiority.
It's a question that has haunted investigators for years, and it becomes even more perplexing when you consider the DNA evidence.
DNA. Surely that had to provide some answers.
You would think so, wouldn't you? And it did, in a way. DNA was recovered from the scene, from blood, saliva, and even feces. The analysis revealed that the killer was of mixed ancestry, with an East Asian paternal line and a Southern European maternal line.
So maybe someone who stood out in a predominantly Japanese society.
That was the hope. Investigators scoured their databases, hoping for a match, someone with this unique genetic profile. But again, nothing. No matches in Japan or any international database they had access to.
It's as if he appeared out of thin air, committed this horrific crime, and then vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but a ghost of a genetic profile. It's mind-boggling.
And we haven't even touched on the footprints yet.
Footprints? What kind of footprints?
A trail of footprints, clear as day, leading in and out of the house. They were distinctive, matching a specific type of sneaker, Korean-made Slazenger sneakers, a brand not commonly found in Japan at that time.
Another potential lead. Were they able to track down the shoes?
They were. They found the manufacturer, traced the distribution network, and narrowed down the potential retailers who might have sold that specific type of shoe. But you guessed it, another dead end. No connection to the killer.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. Every piece of evidence, every clue, every potential lead seems to evaporate into thin air. It's as if the killer meticulously planned every step, not only to commit the murders, but also to ensure he would never be caught.
That's the chilling reality of the Setagaya case. It's a case that defies logic, a puzzle with pieces that seem to fit together, yet somehow never quite complete the picture.
So we've got a rare sweater, a uniquely purchased knife, a distinct DNA profile, and unusual sneakers.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other clues that stand out?
Oh, there's one more detail, perhaps the most perplexing of all: sand.
Sand? What do you mean sand? Where did they find sand?
Investigators discovered traces of sand in the killer's hip bag. And this wasn't just any sand. Analysis revealed that it matched sand found at a very specific location, Edwards Air Force Base in California.
Wait, Edwards Air Force Base? As in the one in the United States?
The very same.
Now, this is where things get really interesting. Are we talking about a military connection here? Was this killer potentially a soldier, maybe someone stationed at that base?
It's a question that immediately sent shockwaves through the investigation. Could this seemingly random act of violence in a quiet Tokyo suburb be linked to something far larger, far more sinister?
This is where we'll leave you hanging, dear listeners. Join us for part 2 as we delve deeper into the perplexing clues of the Setagaya family murders, the investigation that seems to lead in circles, and the theories that continue to swirl around this unsolved case. Welcome back to CrimePod Castle's Twisted Crime series. You know, I have to admit that cliffhanger at the end of the last part left me with more questions than answers.
It's the kind of case that draws you in, isn't it? The sand from Edwards Air Force Base is a curveball, a detail that seems ripped from a spy novel.
It certainly throws a wrench into everything we thought we knew about the case.
Yeah.
We were discussing the killer's meticulous nature, the deliberate way he seemed to leave clues, but if he was connected to the military, wouldn't he be more careful, more trained to avoid leaving any trace?
That's the million-dollar question. It's almost as if he wanted to be traced back to Edwards, but then again, why leave behind such a blatant clue? It doesn't quite add up.
It's baffling. So what happened when investigators started looking into that connection? Did they find anything concrete linking the killer to the base?
They dug deep, believe me. They scrutinized personnel records, investigated anyone who might have been in Japan around the time of the murders, even explored the possibility of covert operations or black ops. But it was all a dead end. No solid link ever emerged.
So the sand remains an enigma, a tantalizing clue that hints at a larger story but ultimately leads to more questions than answers. It's enough to make your head spin.
It's a frustration shared by everyone who has delved into this case. But let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the crime scene itself. The layout of the Miyazawa home, the way the killer moved through the house, it all adds to the unsettling nature of this crime.
I'm all ears. What can you tell us about the house and how the crime unfolded within its walls?
The Miyazawa home was a typical two-story Japanese house in a quiet residential neighborhood. The layout was straightforward, with bedrooms on the second floor and living spaces on the first. As we discussed, the intruder entered through that second floor bathroom window.
Right, that small window that suggested either a small stature or incredible agility.
Exactly. But here's another detail that has always struck me as odd. There were no signs of forced entry. The window latch was undamaged, suggesting it was either unlocked or the killer had a way to open it without leaving a trace.
Now that you mention it, that does add another layer of premeditation to the whole thing. It implies a level of familiarity, perhaps even comfort, with that specific window.
Precisely. It's as if he knew exactly how to get in, almost as if he'd done it before. And once he was inside, he didn't hesitate. He went straight for Ray's bedroom, leaving a trail of bloody footprints that investigators were able to follow.
It's terrifying to think about. The silence of the house, the sleeping family, and then this intruder moving silently, purposefully toward his victims.
And the violence, as we've discussed, was swift and brutal. The killer didn't just subdue his victims, he seemed determined to eliminate them, to silence them permanently.
But then after the murders, he lingered, and that's the part that continues to baffle me. Why stay in the house for hours? What was he doing during that time?
It's a question that has fueled endless speculation. Was he reveling in what he had done? Was he trying to clean up the crime scene? Or was there something more sinister, a more psychological motive at play?
You mentioned earlier that there were some forensic details that added to the complexity of the case.
Oh yes, there's one in particular that stands out. Remember the bloody handprint found near the stairs?
Of course. I assumed it was the killer's handprint.
That's what everyone assumed. But when they analyzed the handprint, they discovered something unexpected.
What do you mean?
The handprint was left by someone who was left-handed?
But wait, wasn't all the other evidence consistent with a right-handed individual? The way the knife was held, the angle of the wounds?
Exactly. And that's where things get murky. How do you explain a left-handed handprint in a crime scene that otherwise screams right-handed attacker?
Are we talking about two different people? Was there an accomplice?
That's one possibility, of course, but there's no other evidence to suggest a second person was present? No other footprints, no other DNA, nothing?
So if we're to assume it was a single perpetrator, how do we explain the left-handed handprint?
It's a puzzle, isn't it? Some forensic experts have suggested that the killer might have deliberately used his non-dominant hand to try and mislead investigators.
Wow, now that's a level of cunning we haven't seen yet in this case. It suggests a deep understanding of forensic science, a deliberate attempt to create confusion, to throw a wrench into the works.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? This isn't just a brutal killer. This is someone who is thinking several steps ahead, someone who is playing mind games with the very people trying to catch him.
And it brings us right back to the psychological profile of the killer. What kind of person could commit such a horrific act and then seemingly vanish into thin air, leaving behind this trail of contradictory clues?
Criminal profilers have spent countless hours analyzing this case, trying to piece together a picture of the mind behind the murders.
And what have they concluded? What kind of person are we dealing with?
The consensus is that the killer is likely highly intelligent, organized, and meticulous. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a planned attack carefully executed with steps taken to avoid detection.
That aligns with the premeditation we've discussed, the way he entered the house, the deliberate nature of some of the evidence he left behind.
Exactly. And the left-handed handprint, if it was a deliberate act of deception, reinforces that theory. This is someone who is not only capable of violence, but also capable of manipulating the evidence, of playing psychological games.
But what about his motive? Any insights there? Why target this family? Was it personal or was it random? A crime of opportunity, as some have suggested.
That's the question that continues to haunt everyone involved in this case. The motive remains elusive, shrouded in mystery. Profilers have explored several possibilities, ranging from a personal grudge to a thrill kill, but nothing concrete has ever emerged.
So we're back to square one. A mountain of evidence. A suspect who seems to have vanished without a trace and a motive that remains a mystery.
It's frustrating, I know. But sometimes the most compelling cases are the ones that resist easy answers, the ones that challenge our assumptions about how and why these horrific acts occur.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground, from the chilling details of the crime itself to the perplexing clues that have baffled investigators for over 2 decades. But our deep dive isn't over yet. Join us for the final part of this episode as we explore the cultural impact of this case, the ongoing efforts to solve it, and what the future holds for this enduring mystery. Welcome back to CrimePod Castle for the final chapter of our deep dive into the Setagaya family murders. We've walked through the crime scene, sifted through the evidence, and tried to make sense of the killer's, baffling actions.
We've seen how this case, with its meticulous planning and seemingly careless blunders, has challenged investigators at every turn.
And yet, even with all the dead ends and unanswered questions, there's still a part of me that wants to believe this case can be solved. That somehow, someday, justice will be served.
That hope is what keeps investigators going, and it's what fuels the public's fascination with this case, even after all these years. But, beyond the desire for closure, the Setagaya murders had a profound impact on Japanese society, didn't it?
Absolutely. We touched on it briefly in the previous parts, but I think it's worth delving deeper into that cultural impact. This case shook Japan to its core.
It did. Japan, with its reputation for safety and order, had never experienced anything quite like this before. It shattered the illusion of security that many had taken for granted.
I remember reading that in the years following the murders, there was a surge in demand for home security systems, and sales of personal safety devices skyrocketed.
That's right. People were suddenly hyper-aware of their surroundings, looking over their shoulders, double-checking their locks. Parents became more cautious about letting their children play outside unsupervised. There was a palpable sense of fear that permeated society.
It's a reminder that even in the most, seemingly safe and peaceful of societies, darkness can lurk in unexpected places. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that no one is truly immune to violence.
And in a country like Japan, where conformity and societal harmony are highly valued, this case was a stark anomaly, a jarring disruption of the collective sense of order.
It's as if this case exposed a crack in the facade, a vulnerability that had always been there but was suddenly brought into sharp focus.
Exactly, and that vulnerability, that sense of unease, has lingered in some ways even after all these years. The Setagaya murders became a part of the national consciousness, a chilling reminder that even in a society that prides itself on safety, horrific acts can occur, and sometimes they go unsolved.
So how has this case changed the way crime is investigated in Japan? Did it lead to any reforms or improvement in the criminal justice system?
It certainly did. The Setagaya case exposed some vulnerabilities that authorities were determined to address. For example, at the time, Japan's DNA database was relatively small.
Right, and we talked about how the killer's DNA, that unique mix of East Asian and Southern European ancestry, could have been a much quicker lead if they had a larger database to compare it against.
Exactly. So in the years since the murders, Japan has significantly expanded its DNA collection and analysis capabilities. They've also implemented stricter protocols for evidence collection and preservation, recognizing the importance of maintaining the integrity of the chain of custody.
It's a testament to the fact that sometimes even from the darkest of tragedies, positive change can emerge.
Indeed. The Setagaya case became a catalyst for improvements in forensic science and investigative techniques. It forced law enforcement to reevaluate their methods, to embrace new technologies, and to prioritize the meticulous collection and analysis of evidence.
It's a reminder that we can learn from our mistakes, even the most heartbreaking ones. And speaking of learning, what about the ongoing efforts to solve this case? Are investigators still actively working on it?
Absolutely. The Setagaya case remains open, and the Metropolitan Police Department in Tokyo has repeatedly stated that they are committed to solving it.
That's encouraging to hear. It would be easy after all these years to simply file it away as a cold case, an unsolvable mystery.
But that's not the Japanese way. There's a cultural emphasis on perseverance, on never giving up even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And they haven't given up on the Miyazawa family.
So what are they doing now? Are there any new leads or developments?
They have a dedicated team of detectives who continue to review the evidence, follow up on any new tips that come in, and utilize advances in forensic technology.
Technology has certainly played a role in solving cold cases in recent years. There's always the hope that a new technique, a new piece of software, might unlock a clue that was previously overlooked.
That's the hope. And with advancements in DNA analysis, facial recognition software, and even artificial intelligence being applied to cold cases, there's reason to believe that even a case as cold as the Setagaya murders could one day be solved.
It's a reminder that the pursuit of justice is an ongoing process, one that requires patience, dedication, and a belief that even the most baffling mysteries can eventually be unraveled.
And it's not just the police who are determined to find answers. The families of the victims have been tireless advocates, keeping the case in the public eye and urging anyone with information to come forward.
Their strength and resilience in the face of such unimaginable loss is truly remarkable.
It is. They haven't given up hope, and neither should we. That's the power of these true crime cases, the stories that capture our attention and refuse to let go. They remind us that the search for truth and justice is an ongoing process, one that requires persistence, dedication, and a belief that even the darkest mysteries deserve to be solved.
Well said. This has been a deeply unsettling but also incredibly fascinating journey into one of Japan's most enduring mysteries. We've explored the darkness, grappled with the unanswered questions, and acknowledged the enduring impact this case has had on individuals, families, and an entire society.
And while we may not have all the answers, we hope this deep dive has shed some light on the complexity of the Setagaya family murders and the ongoing efforts to bring the perpetrator to justice.
For our listeners who are just as captivated by this case as we are, we encourage you to continue your own exploration. Read the books, watch the documentaries, and delve into the online forums dedicated to this enduring mystery.
And if you have any information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please contact the authorities. Every tip, every piece of information could be the key to finally unlocking the secrets of the Setagaya family murders.
This case, while tragic and haunting, is also a testament to the power of human curiosity, our need to understand the darkness, and our unwavering pursuit of justice. Even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, hope remains.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and perhaps even a little bit chilling.
Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the shadows often hold more than we can see.
And don't forget to follow and subscribe to CrimePod Castle and our YouTube channel for more deep dives into the world of true crime.